The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside Fort McDowell, Arizona, and Olivia Barrett stumbled out into the blazing afternoon sun of 1878, her dress torn at the hem and her hands still trembling from 3 days of bone-rattling travel. She had nowhere to go, no money left after her mother-in-law had taken everything, and the August heat pressed down on her like a physical weight as she stood in the dusty street watching the coach pull away. Her husband had been dead only 2 months when Margaret Barrett had turned on her like a viper, declaring that the ranch belonged to blood relatives only, and that Olivia had no right to stay another day under her roof. "You are nothing to this family," Margaret had hissed, her eyes cold as winter stone. "My son made a mistake marrying you, and I will not spend another penny keeping you fed. Get out." Olivia had begged, had pleaded, had reminded Margaret that she had nowhere else to go and no family of her own, but the older woman had been unmoved. She had given Olivia enough money for a stagecoach ticket to the nearest town and nothing more, leaving her to fend for herself in a territory that was harsh and unforgiving to women alone. Now here she stood in Fort McDowell, a town she had never seen before, with exactly $3 to her name and the clothes on her back. The main street stretched before her, lined with weathered wooden buildings that seemed to sag under the weight of the desert sun. A saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, a hotel that looked like it had seen better days. Men in dusty hats moved along the wooden sidewalks, their eyes sliding over her with varying degrees of curiosity and speculation. Olivia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the heat, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. She needed work. She needed a place to stay. She needed to figure out how to survive in this strange town where she knew no one and had no prospects. Her stomach twisted with fear and hunger, reminding her that she had not eaten since yesterday morning. The general store seemed like the best place to start. Olivia gathered what remained of her courage and crossed the street, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The interior was dim and cool, smelling of leather and tobacco and coffee beans. Behind the counter stood a weathered man with gray in his beard, his eyes sharp and assessing as she approached. "I am looking for work," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I can clean, I can cook, I can do laundry or mending, anything honest." The storekeeper looked her up and down, his expression not unkind but not particularly hopeful either. "Not much call for help around here, miss. Most folks do for themselves. You got family in town?" "No, I just arrived." "Husband, dead." The man's face softened slightly. "I am sorry for your loss, but I cannot help you. Business is not good enough to hire anyone new." He paused, seeming to consider something. "The hotel might need someone to change linens and such. Mrs. Patterson runs it. She is particular about who she hires, though." Olivia thanked him and left, her hope dimming with each step. The hotel was even less promising. Mrs. Patterson, a woman with a pinched face and suspicious eyes, looked at Olivia's travel-stained dress and torn hem and shook her head before Olivia had even finished speaking. "I do not hire drifters," she said flatly. "Move along." By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Olivia had been turned away from every establishment in town. Her $3 would buy her perhaps 2 nights at the cheapest boarding house and a few meals, and then she would have nothing. The reality of her situation settled over her like a shroud. Margaret had thrown her to the wolves, and the wolves were closing in. She found herself at the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open land, and the first stirrings of evening breeze brought some relief from the heat. In the distance, she could see a ranch house and barn, larger and better maintained than most of the structures in Fort McDowell. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and she could see men working near the barn, their silhouettes dark against the reddening sky. Desperation made her bold. One more try. One more chance to find work before darkness fell. And she had to face the reality of spending her precious few dollars on a bed for the night. The walk to the ranch took longer than she expected, and by the time she reached the gate, the sun was touching the western mountains and painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A man was walking from the barn toward the house, tall and lean with a weathered face and dark hair shot through with silver. He moved with the easy grace of someone who had spent his whole life working with his body, and as he caught sight of her standing at the gate, he stopped and pushed his hat back on his head. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice was deep and rough-edged, but not unfriendly. Olivia swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how she must look, disheveled and desperate and alone. "I am looking for work, any kind of work. I can cook and clean and tend animals. I am a hard worker and I will not cause any trouble." The man walked closer, and in the fading light, she could see that his face was lined and weathered by years in the sun, but his eyes were a striking blue-green, clear and direct. He looked to be in his early 40s, old enough to have experience written in every line of his face, but not so old as to seem ancient to her 23 years. "You new in town?" he asked. "I arrived today." "From where?" "New Mexico. My husband died and his mother sent me away." The words came out in a rush, and she felt her cheeks heat with shame at having to admit her circumstances to a stranger. The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he opened the gate and gestured for her to follow him. "Come on up to the house. You look like you could use a meal and a place to sit down." "I am asking for work, not charity," Olivia said quickly, even as her stomach cramped with hunger. "I know what you are asking for. Come on." She followed him across the yard to the ranch house, a solid structure of wood and stone with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. He opened the door and led her into a large kitchen that was surprisingly clean and well organized for a place that seemed to be run by men alone. A pot of something savory bubbled on the stove, filling the air with the smell of meat and vegetables. "Sit," the man said, gesturing to a chair at the long wooden table. "I am Ryder Novak. I own this ranch. Olivia Barrett." He ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of her, along with a hunk of bread and a glass of water. "Eat first, then we will talk." Olivia wanted to maintain her dignity, wanted to eat slowly and politely, but her hunger was too great. She ate like she had not seen food in days, which was not far from the truth, and when she finally set down her spoon, she found Ryder watching her with something that might have been sympathy in his eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning." He nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. What kind of woman sends her daughter-in-law away with nothing? The kind who never wanted her son to marry me in the first place. Olivia looked down at her empty bowl, shame and anger warring in her chest. "She said I had no claim on the family, that I was nothing to them now that Thomas was gone. Your husband." "Yes." Ryder got up and refilled her water glass, then sat down across from her. "I lost my wife 7 years ago. Fever took her in the space of 3 days. We never had children, and after she was gone, this place felt too big and too empty. I have 3 ranch hands who help with the cattle and the daily work, but the house has been neglected. I could use someone to cook and keep things clean, tend the vegetable garden, maybe help with the chickens. It is hard work, and the days are long, but I pay fair wages and you would have your own room in the house." Olivia felt tears prick at her eyes, relief so intense it was almost painful flooding through her. "I would be grateful for the work. I promise you will not regret it." "I am sure I will not." He stood and held out his hand. "Welcome to the Double N Ranch, daughter. The The word hit her like a physical blow, unexpected and overwhelming. Daughter. Not hired help, not servant, not charity case. Daughter. She took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip, and something in her chest that had been tight and painful since Margaret had thrown her out began to ease just slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Ryder showed her to a small room off the kitchen, simply furnished with a bed, a dresser and a washstand, but clean and private and more than she had dared hope for. "Get some rest," he said. "We start early around here, but you have had a long journey. Tomorrow is soon enough to begin." That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in days, Olivia let herself cry. She cried for Thomas, who had been a kind if unremarkable husband and had not deserved to die at 26 from a fall off his horse. She cried for the life she had thought she would have, the family she had hoped to build. And she cried with relief that someone had finally shown her kindness when she had needed it most. The next morning, she woke before dawn to the sound of men's voices in the yard. She dressed quickly in her spare dress, which was only marginally less worn than the one she had traveled in, and made her way to the kitchen. Ryder was already there, building up the fire in the stove. "Morning," he said, glancing over at her. "You did not have to get up so early." "You said you start early. I want to earn my keep." He smiled, and it transformed his face, erasing some of the hard lines and making him look younger. "All right, then. Let me show you where everything is." The ranch hands came in for breakfast at 6. 3 men who ranged from a grizzled old cowboy named Pete to a fresh-faced young man, barely out of his teens, named Danny. They were surprised to see Olivia, but not unwelcoming, and they ate the eggs and bacon she cooked with enthusiastic appreciation. "Best meal I have had in months," Pete declared, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "No offense, boss, but your cooking leaves something to be desired," Ryder laughed. "None taken. That is why Olivia is here." Over the following days, Olivia settled into a rhythm. She rose before dawn to cook breakfast for the men, then spent her mornings cleaning the house and tending the vegetable garden that had been half wild with weeds. In the afternoons, she did laundry and mending, baked bread, and prepared the evening meal. The work was hard and endless, but it was honest, and she found a deep satisfaction in bringing order to the neglected house. Ryder was a fair employer, but more than that, he was kind in ways that surprised her. He asked about her day over dinner, listened when she talked about her plans for the garden, brought her fabric from town so she could make herself a new dress. He told her stories about the ranch, about the years he and his wife had built it from nothing, about the challenges of raising cattle in Arizona's harsh climate. "Sarah would have liked you," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "She always said this house needed the sound of a woman's voice. You must miss her very much. Every day. But the missing gets easier with time. The sharpness fades, and what is left is mostly the good memories." He glanced over at her. "It will be that way for you too, eventually." Olivia nodded, though she was not sure that was true. Her marriage to Thomas had been arranged by their parents, more a matter of convenience and property than love. She had been fond of him, and his death had been a shock, but she did not feel the deep grief that Ryder clearly still carried for Sarah. As weeks turned into months, Olivia found herself thinking about Ryder more and more. She noticed the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he handled the horses, the quiet competence with which he ran the ranch. He was patient with the younger ranch hands, firm but fair when problems arose, and generous in ways that went beyond her wages. When she mentioned wanting to plant roses by the porch, he brought her cuttings from town. When she caught a cold in late October, he made her rest and brought her soup himself. "You are going to wear yourself out," he said, sitting on the edge of the chair in her room while she lay in bed feeling miserable. "You do not have to prove anything to me, Olivia. I already know you are a hard worker. I do not want you to think you made a mistake hiring me." "I could never think that." He reached out and patted her hand awkwardly, a gesture that was both fatherly and something else she could not quite name. "You have been a blessing to this place, to me." Something shifted between them that day. The easy employer and employee relationship began to change into something deeper, something neither of them seemed quite sure how to navigate. Olivia found herself looking for excuses to be near him, to hear his voice, to see his smile. She noticed when he took extra care with his appearance before coming in for meals, when he lingered over coffee in the evenings to talk with her after the ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse. It was Pete who finally said something. She was hanging laundry on the line one November afternoon when the old cowboy ambled over, his weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "Boss is sweet on you," he said without preamble. Olivia felt her face heat. "That is not appropriate to say." "Maybe not, but it is true. I have worked for Ryder Novak for 15 years, and I have never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you. Not since Sarah died." Pete leaned against the fence post, his eyes kind. "Question is, are you sweet on him?" "I do not know," Olivia said honestly, her hand stilling on the wet sheet she was hanging. "He has been so good to me. I do not want to confuse gratitude with something else. Gratitude does not make a woman's eyes light up when a man walks into a room. Gratitude does not make a woman hum while she cooks his favorite meals." Pete tipped his hat back. "I am just saying, life is short. Do not waste time pretending you do not feel what you feel." That evening, Olivia found herself watching Ryder more closely, paying attention to the small things she had been trying not to notice. The way his gaze followed her around the kitchen. The way he always made sure she had the comfortable chair by the fire. The way his voice softened when he said her name. It was December before anything was said out loud. They were on the porch again, wrapped in coats against the desert night's chill, watching stars blaze across the black sky. Ryder had been quiet all evening, and Olivia could sense something weighing on his mind. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, his voice rough. "And I do not want you to feel obligated to respond in any particular way. You work for me, and I know that creates a power imbalance. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel what I feel." Olivia's heart began to pound. "What do you feel?" He turned to look at her, his eyes shadowed in the darkness but intense. "I've come to care for you, Olivia, more than an employer should care for someone who works for him. More than I thought I would ever care for anyone again after Sarah died. You have brought light back into this house, into my life, and I find myself looking forward to every morning because I know I will see you. I think about you when I am out on the range. I worry about you when you work too hard. And I want things I have no right to want." "What things?" Olivia whispered. "A future. A family. A life with someone who understands what it means to work hard and to build something. Someone who can laugh at my terrible jokes, and who makes the best bread I have ever tasted, and who fits into this place like she was always meant to be here." He paused, then added quietly, "Someone like you." Olivia felt tears sting her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "When you called me daughter that first night, it meant more to me than you could possibly know. My own parents died when I was young, and Margaret never wanted me. But you made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like I mattered. And over these months, I have come to care for you too. Not as a father, though, not as an employer, as a man." Ryder reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "I am 20 years older than you. I have gray in my hair and aches in my joints, and I am set in my ways. You are 43, not ancient. And I am 23, not a child. I know my own mind, Ryder. I know what I want." "What do you want?" "You. A life here. A chance to build something real with someone who sees me as more than an inconvenience or a burden." She squeezed his hand. "I want to belong somewhere, and I think maybe I belong here. With you." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender and old-fashioned that it made her breath catch. "I do not want to rush you. We can take this slow. Court properly. Make sure this is what you really want." "I am sure," Olivia said, "but I am not opposed to courting." They courted through the winter, and it was the happiest time of Olivia's life. Ryder brought her wildflowers when he could find them, took her on rides across the ranch to see the land in all its harsh beauty, sat with her in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing. He kissed her for the first time on Christmas Eve, a soft and tentative press of lips that made her feel cherished and desired in equal measure. The ranch hands were thrilled, especially Pete, who claimed credit for the whole thing. Even Danny, the youngest hand, said he thought they made a good pair. "You are good for him," Pete told Olivia one morning. "He was just going through the motions before you came. Now he is living again." In February, Ryder asked her to marry him. They were in the barn, of all places, checking on a mare who was about to foal. He had just helped deliver the gangly-legged colt when he turned to her, hay in his hair and a smile on his face. "Marry me," he said. "I know I should do this proper with a ring and a fancy speech, but I cannot wait. I want you to be my wife, Olivia. I want to wake up next to you every morning and build a life with you and maybe, if we are blessed, have children of our own. Say yes." Olivia laughed through tears and threw her arms around his neck, not caring about the hay or the horse or anything except the man holding her. Yes, yes, of course yes. They were married in March of 1879 in Fort McDowell's small church, with Pete and the other ranch hands as witnesses. Olivia wore a new dress that Ryder had bought her, soft blue calico that brought out the color in her eyes, and carried a bouquet of desert wildflowers. Ryder wore his best suit and looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. The night of their wedding, he carried her over the threshold of the ranch house that was now truly her home, not just a place she worked. He made love to her with patience and tenderness, and afterward, she lay in his arms feeling like she had finally found where she was meant to be. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too, daughter of my heart, wife of my soul." He kissed her forehead. "Thank you for taking a chance on an old cowboy. You are not old, and I would take a chance on you 1,000 times over." Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were times when money was tight and worries ran high. But they faced everything together, and Olivia discovered that she was stronger than she had ever known. She learned to ride, to help with the cattle when extra hands were needed, to manage the ranch accounts and deal with buyers in town. Ryder, in turn, learned to let her be a full partner in the ranch's operation, not just the keeper of the house. He valued her opinions, trusted her judgment, and never made her feel like she was anything less than his equal. In the spring of 1880, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening after dinner, her heart pounding with a mixture of joy and nervousness. They had talked about children, but she had not been sure how he would feel when it became real. He stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing like a boy. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. You are happy." "Happy does not begin to cover it." He set her down gently, his hands framing her face. "You have given me so much, Olivia. A reason to live again, a future to look forward to, and now this. I cannot believe how blessed I am." Their son was born in November, a healthy baby boy with his father's blue-green eyes and a powerful set of lungs. They named him Samuel, and Ryder cried when he held him for the first time. "I never thought I would have this," he said, looking down at the tiny face. "A family of my own." "Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for everything. Thank you for taking me in when I had nowhere else to go," she replied, touching his cheek. "Thank you for calling me daughter when I needed a father. Thank you for loving me when I needed a husband. Thank you for giving me a home." "You gave me a home too. I was just living in a house before you came." The years that followed were full and rich. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler, curious about everything and fearless in the way of ranch children. In 1882, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, who had her mother's dark hair and gentle disposition. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from a modest operation to one of the most successful in the territory. Pete remained with them until he died peacefully in his sleep in 1885, and they mourned him as family. Danny grew into a fine young man and eventually bought his own small ranch nearby, remaining a close friend and occasional business partner. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco, the farthest she had ever traveled. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate in fancy restaurants, and walked along the waterfront like young lovers. But they were both eager to get home to the ranch, to their children, to the life they had built together. "You ever think about that day you showed up at my gate?" Ryder asked as they sat on the train heading back to Arizona. "All the time. I was so scared, so desperate. I thought my life was over. And instead it was just beginning, for both of us." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to hate Margaret for what she did to me, throwing me out with nothing. But now I almost want to thank her. If she had not sent me away, I never would have found you. Her loss was my gain. And she was wrong, you know. You were not nothing. You were everything. You just had not found the place where you could shine yet." In 1889, their youngest child was born, another boy they named Thomas after Olivia's first husband, a gesture of healing and acceptance of the past. Ryder had suggested it, saying that Thomas had been part of Olivia's story, and they should honor that rather than pretend it had never happened. As the 19th century drew to a close, Olivia sometimes stood on the porch of the ranch house and marveled at how much her life had changed. The frightened, desperate woman who had arrived in Fort McDowell with $3 and no prospects seemed like someone from another lifetime. In her place stood a confident rancher's wife, a mother of 3, a woman who had found her strength and her voice and her place in the world. Samuel was preparing to take over more of the ranch operations, learning the business from his father with the same patience Ryder had once shown his ranch hands. Rose was turning into a beautiful young woman with a gift for working with horses. Little Thomas was still small but already showed signs of having his father's practical nature and his mother's kind heart. On a warm evening in May of 1895, Ryder and Olivia sat on their porch watching the sun set over the desert, just as they had done countless times over the years. His hair was more gray than dark now, and her face bore the lines of a woman who had lived and worked and loved well. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You remember what I called you that first night?" Ryder asked. "Daughter." "I meant it, you know. I wanted you to know that you had found a safe place, that someone was going to look after you, but I never expected to fall in love with you. That was not part of the plan." Olivia smiled. "The best things in life rarely are. You saved me, Ryder." "In every way a person can be saved. We saved each other. I was just existing before you came. You reminded me how to live." From inside the house came the sound of laughter. Their children gathered around the dinner table they had yet to clear. In the distance, cattle lowed softly in the gathering dusk. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and the promise of another hot day tomorrow. "I love you," Olivia said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she had spoken them. "I love you too," Ryder replied, lifting her hand to his lips for a kiss. "My daughter, my wife, my partner, my love. Thank you for saying yes to an old cowboy all those years ago. Thank you for opening your gate to a desperate woman with nowhere else to turn. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for calling me daughter when I needed family and loving me when I needed a husband. Thank you for giving me a life I never dreamed I could have." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. The same stars that had watched over them that first night when a broken woman had found refuge and a lonely man had found purpose again. The ranch that had been too empty for one and too overwhelming for the other had become a home filled with love and laughter and life. Olivia thought about Margaret sometimes, wondered if the old woman had ever regretted her cruelty. But the thoughts held no bitterness now, only a distant gratitude. Being thrown to the wolves had led her to this place, this man, this life. She had survived the wilderness and found something more precious than she had ever imagined possible. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge. Samuel married a woman from town in 1898, bringing her to live at the ranch and ensuring that another generation would carry on the legacy. Rose announced her engagement to Danny's younger brother in 1900, a union that would unite two neighboring ranches and create bonds that would last for generations. In the spring of 1903, Olivia became a grandmother for the first time when Samuel and his wife had a daughter. Holding the tiny infant in her arms, Olivia marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a woman with nothing, thrown away by family who should have protected her, to a grandmother surrounded by love and legacy. Ryder, now in his late 60s but still working the ranch with the determination that had built it, stood beside her looking at his granddaughter with wonder in his eyes. "Sarah would have loved this, but I think she would be happy that you are here to see it instead. You made this family, Olivia. You and me together." "We built something beautiful," Olivia agreed. Young Thomas showed a gift for breeding cattle and began developing a strain particularly suited to the Arizona climate, earning recognition from ranchers across the territory. Rose's wedding in 1901 was the social event of Fort McDowell, bringing people from miles around to celebrate the union of two well-respected families. The ranch continued to prosper, expanding its holdings and becoming known throughout Arizona for the quality of its cattle and the fairness of its dealings. Ryder credited Olivia's head for business and her insistence on treating everyone with respect and dignity, from the wealthiest buyer to the humblest ranch hand. As Ryder moved into his 70s, he gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Samuel, though he never fully retired. He still rose early to check on the cattle, still rode out to inspect the far pastures, still made the final decisions on major purchases or sales. But he also made time for leisure in a way he never had before, taking long rides with Olivia, playing with his growing number of grandchildren, and sitting on the porch in the evenings remembering all they had accomplished together. "I am a lucky man," he said one night in 1908, 30 years after they had first met. "I had two great loves in my life, and that is more than most men can say. Sarah gave me the courage to build this place. You gave me the reason to keep it going." "You gave me a life when mine had ended," Olivia replied. "You saw me as a person worth saving when everyone else saw me as a burden to be discarded. I will never forget that you called me daughter before you ever thought of me as a woman to love. Best decision I ever made, opening that gate." The Arizona Territory became a state in 1912, and the Novak Ranch celebrated along with everyone else, flying the new 48-star flag proudly from the front porch. Ryder, now 77, still worked the ranch alongside his sons, though age had slowed him down and arthritis pained his joints on cold mornings. It was in the spring of 1915 that Ryder finally admitted he could no longer keep the pace he once had. He was not ill exactly, just tired in a way that sleep could not fix. He and Olivia spent more time together, taking slow walks around the ranch they had built, reminiscing about the decades they had shared. "I have no regrets," he told her one evening. "I lived a full life, did work I am proud of, loved 2 good women and raised fine children. A man cannot ask for more than that." "You have many years left," Olivia said, though fear clutched at her heart. "Maybe. But if I do not, I want you to know that these years with you were the happiest of my life. Not because I loved Sarah any less, but because you gave me a second chance when I thought my life was over. You taught me that love can come more than once, that new beginnings are possible at any age." Ryder Novak died peacefully in his sleep in November of 1915, 3 months shy of his 80th birthday. The funeral drew people from across the state, a testament to the respect he had earned over his long life. He was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, next to the spot he had reserved for Olivia when her time came. Olivia grieved, but it was a different grief than she had felt for Thomas all those years ago. This was the grief of a woman who had truly loved and been truly loved in return, who had built a life and a family, and a legacy with a man who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. She remained at the ranch, watching her children and grandchildren carry on the work she and Ryder had started. Samuel ran the operation with the same fairness and integrity his father had shown. Rose and her husband's ranch thrived. Thomas had married and brought his wife to help manage the accounts and expand into new markets. On quiet evenings, Olivia would sit on the porch and remember. She remembered arriving in Fort McDowell with nothing, remembered the kindness of a stranger who had fed her and called her daughter, remembered falling in love when she had thought she would never love again. She remembered building a home, raising children, creating a legacy that would outlast them both. In the summer of 1920, as she approached her 65th birthday, Olivia's grandchildren gathered around her asking for stories. She told them about their grandfather, about his strength and his kindness and his wisdom. She told them about the ranch when it was smaller, about the struggles and the triumphs, about what it meant to build something with your own hands and your own sweat. And sometimes, when they were very quiet and attentive, she told them about the day she had arrived with nothing and been welcomed by a man who had every reason to turn her away, but chose instead to open his heart and his home. She told them about being called daughter by someone who owed her nothing, and how that simple act of kindness had changed the course of her entire life. "Your grandfather taught me that family is not just about blood," she would say. "It is about choosing to love and support each other, about building something together that is bigger than any one person. He chose me when I had nowhere else to go, and I chose him when we both thought we were too old and too broken for new love. And from those choices came all of this." She would gesture to the ranch, to the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who now carried on the Novak name, to the land that had been tamed and nurtured and made productive through decades of hard work and dedication. "Never forget that we all deserve kindness, especially when we are at our lowest. Your grandfather knew that, he lived it, and because he did, all of you are here today." The years were kind to Olivia. She remained healthy and active well into her 70s, still managing the household accounts, still tending her garden, still dispensing advice and wisdom to the ever-growing family. She delighted in her great-grandchildren, watching them play in the yard where their grandparents and great-grandparents had played before them. She never remarried. There were offers, but she always declined gently. She had been blessed with 2 husbands, one who had been kind if not passionate, and one who had been the great love of her life. That was enough. More than enough. In the winter of 1928, Olivia caught pneumonia. She was 73, and though she fought it bravely, her strength finally failed. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her bed in the room she had shared with Ryder for so many happy years. "Do not grieve too much," she told them, her voice weak but steady. "I have lived a long and blessed life. I found love when I thought I would die alone and unloved. I built a family when I thought I had been thrown away like trash. I helped create something that will last long after I am gone. What more could anyone want?" Samuel held one of her hands, Rose the other. Thomas stood at the foot of the bed with his arm around his own son. The room was full of people who existed because a lonely rancher had taken pity on a desperate woman at his gate 50 years ago. "Tell me about the day you met Papa," Rose said softly, as she had asked so many times over the years. Olivia smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "I was so scared. I had nowhere to go, no money, no prospects. His mother-in-law had thrown me out with nothing but a stagecoach ticket and cruel words. I thought my life was over. And then I came to the gate of this ranch, and your father was walking toward me in the setting sun. He looked strong and weathered and competent, like someone who could handle whatever life threw at him. And when I asked for work, he looked at me like he saw past the desperation and the fear to the person underneath. He fed me. He gave me work, and he called me daughter." "Daughter," Rose repeated softly. "I was not his daughter. I was not even his employee yet. But he called me daughter because he wanted me to know that someone cared, that I was not alone anymore. And that moment changed everything. He welcomed me when the world had thrown me to the wolves. He saw worth in me when I saw none in myself. And because of that, because of his kindness and his love, all of you are here." She opened her eyes one last time, looking at the faces gathered around her. "Take care of each other. Be kind even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Welcome those who have nowhere else to go. Build something that matters. And remember that love can come at any time, in any form, if you are brave enough to accept it." Olivia Barrett Novak died peacefully that night, surrounded by the family she and Ryder had created. She was buried next to him on the hill overlooking the ranch, under a headstone that read, "Beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She was welcomed when cast aside, loved when alone, and built a legacy that will never fade. The ranch continued for generations, each one adding to the legacy, each one remembering the story of how it had all begun. The story of a woman who had been thrown away and a man who had chosen to see her value. The story of being called daughter by a stranger who became family, and then becoming a wife to a man who had loved her with patience and constancy. The story of how kindness can change everything, how love can bloom in the desert, and how family is built not just through blood but through choice and commitment and unwavering support through all of life's challenges. And on warm Arizona evenings, when the wind blew across the land that had been Ryder and Olivia's, it seemed to carry their story with it, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are simply doorways to something better than we ever could have imagined, if we are brave enough to walk through them and wise enough to recognize kindness when it is offered.